My name is Sarah, and this is not just a story I tell to pass time. It is the truth I carry in my bones, the memory carved into my heart. It is the storm that nearly swallowed me and the fire I had to light in order to survive. When I was a child, the world felt simple. I had my mother, Alice, whose presence was like a gentle melody that made everything else fade into the background. She smelled of roses and cardamom, and her laughter was a warm light that could reach even the corners of the darkest day. Nights were my favorite, because she would sit by my bed, brush my hair, and sing lullabies that seemed to weave safety into the very walls. I pressed my face against her arm, listening to the rhythm of her heart, and for a while, I believed the world could not harm us. My father loved her too, though he often worked long hours. When he was home, though, we laughed, shared meals, and played board games until our sides ached. I never questioned it, never doubted that our family would remain whole. But when I was 10, everything changed. My mother fell ill, or at least that's what everyone said. She smiled through the pain, insisting it was nothing, just exhaustion. But I saw her weakening, week by week. Her once bright eyes dimmed. Her laughter grew rare, and even her steps were slower. She tried to shield me from her suffering, but children notice things adults try to hide. One night, she kissed my forehead and whispered, "Always remember, Sarah, truth never hides forever." I didn't understand those words then, but I would remember them forever. One morning, she didn't wake up. I remember standing beside her bed, shaking her arm, begging her to open her eyes. I screamed until my throat ached, but she was gone. The house filled with people, relatives crying, neighbors whispering. They said it was sudden, that her heart had failed. I stood frozen, numb, as if someone had ripped the air from my lungs. At her funeral, I sat on a wooden chair, watching the coffin lower into the ground. My father stood near me, his eyes red, his shoulders heavy. But beside him was a woman I had never seen before. She wore a black dress, her hair perfectly styled, her hands folded gracefully. She did not shed a single tear. Her expression was calm, almost serene, and for a brief moment, I saw the corners of her lips curl into a smile. That was the first time I saw Nadia. Not long after the funeral, Nadia became a permanent presence in our home. At first, she played the role of the grieving stepmother, soft-spoken, polite, almost attentive. She cooked meals, organized the house, and even tried to soothe me when I cried at night. It was easy to trust her then, because she seemed like a lifeline, a bridge over the ocean of grief I had been thrown into. But beneath her calm exterior was a quiet, simmering darkness. The first hint came subtly, small remarks when my father wasn't around. Moments when her smile sharpened just slightly. "Your mother always had such high expectations," she'd say casually, her tone almost teasing. "I hope you won't disappoint me the way she might have hoped." I didn't understand then. I thought perhaps I was imagining things. Perhaps grief had made shadows dance where there was only light. But the feeling never left. That prickling sensation that something was not as it seemed. The months passed, and Nadia's control over the household tightened. My father, overwhelmed by grief and charmed by her seeming competence, allowed her more influence than was healthy. She decided what we ate, how the house was managed, and slowly she began to rewrite the rhythm of our lives. She criticized me frequently. Small things, a crooked picture frame, a missed chore, became mountains in her eyes. "You're careless," she said one evening, her voice low but sharp. "Your mother would have done this differently." I felt the weight of her words pressing on me, but I was too young to know how to fight back. All I could do was retreat into myself, writing in secret journals and sketching little worlds where I was safe, where she couldn't touch me. Even then, I noticed that she was not cruel to everyone. Guests were treated with charm, family friends were flattered. The contrast made her cruelty sting sharper because it was intentional. I began to see her for what she was, a manipulator, someone who could smile while cutting you at the core. At school, I noticed changes too. I became quieter, withdrawn. Friends tried to reach me, but I was learning how to carry fear quietly, how to fold it into a part of my being. Then came the incident that opened my eyes completely. I was sitting in the living room, finishing my homework, when I overheard Nadia on the phone. Her voice was low, dangerous, filled with something I couldn't yet name. "Everything is ready. Soon there won't be any trace. He won't see it coming, and neither will she." I froze, heart hammering. That tone, the certainty, the coldness, it was like a knife pressed against my skin. I didn't know what she meant. I didn't dare ask. But that night I couldn't sleep. I thought of my mother, of that gentle presence that had filled our home, now gone. And I realized that Nadia had not simply arrived. She had taken something from me, something irreplaceable. Over time, I began noticing patterns. Strange discrepancies in bills, letters that went missing, subtle manipulations in conversations. She was slowly building a web, and I was trapped inside it. The realization filled me with a mixture of fear and clarity. Fear because she was dangerous. Clarity because now I knew that the war had begun. I began my own quiet preparation. I saved letters, kept track of strange transactions, wrote everything down in a coded journal that Nadia would never find. It was small, painstaking work, but it gave me a sense of control in a household ruled by shadows. School friends noticed the change. I was sharper, quieter, more observant. I didn't tell anyone about Nadia. How could I? Who would believe me? A stepmother who smiled at the PTA and served cakes at birthdays could not be the monster who haunted my nights. One day, I found an envelope tucked behind a loose brick in the study wall. It contained documents, bank statements, signed letters, medical records, evidence of manipulation. My pulse raced. Could this be proof of what I had feared all along? From that moment, I knew I could not rely on anyone. I had to be clever, patient, and vigilant. Revenge, if it came, would require strategy, restraint, and timing. I wasn't yet ready to act, but I was ready to watch, to wait, to learn. The first cracks in her facade came unexpectedly. At a family dinner, she mocked me openly, belittling a drawing I had made for my father. "Really, Sarah, this is what you think is worthy. Your mother would be so disappointed." I didn't respond outwardly, but inwardly I burned. And as I watched her enjoy the spectacle, I realized something crucial. She underestimated me. She believed my youth and quietness were weakness, when in truth, they were my shield. It was around that time that Alina entered my life. She was new to the neighborhood, bright, fearless, and unafraid to ask questions I had been too scared to voice. We became inseparable quickly. She listened, she noticed, and without realizing it, she became my partner in vigilance. Together, we observed Nadia's patterns, mapped her routines, and talked about the injustices we had suffered. Alina's perspective gave me courage. She reminded me that fear could be transformed into strength if directed carefully. By the time I was 12, I had already begun planning. Every interaction with Nadia, every word, every glance was cataloged in my mind. I learned to hide my true emotions, to smile when she smiled, to nod when she spoke, all while building an invisible arsenal of knowledge that would one day serve justice. It was not easy. The nights were long, filled with the haunting absence of my mother, but I survived. And in surviving, I learned the first lesson. Patience is power. And so, the stage was set. The innocent child had grown cautious. The girl who once hid behind her mother's skirts was now learning to navigate a house ruled by a snake. And one day, the snake would strike, and I would be ready. By the time I was 13, I had mastered the art of observation. Every word Nadia spoke, every smile she offered, every careless gesture she allowed herself was cataloged, analyzed, stored in my mind like pieces of a puzzle. I noticed patterns that no adult seemed to see, the way she lingered longer in the study when my father wasn't around, The way her hands trembled ever so slightly when signing documents. The way she subtly redirected conversation so that she always emerged superior. Alina and I spent hours discussing our findings. We weren't children playing detectives. We were strategists, learning the rules of a game we never wanted to play, but had no choice but to master. "Do you think Dad will ever see her for what she is?" I asked one afternoon, watching Nadia from the window as she flitted through the living room, her laughter perfectly measured. Alina shook her head, biting her lip. "He's too blind with grief. He doesn't want to see it. He won't. You'll have to be the one to open his eyes someday." I nodded silently. I didn't like it, but I understood. My father's love for my mother was so deep that his denial was almost sacred. Confronting him prematurely could destroy him, and I couldn't allow that, not yet. Instead, I focused on evidence. The hidden letters, the altered documents, the small financial manipulations. All of it painted a picture that was slowly becoming undeniable. Every night, I cross-checked my notes, ensuring that when the time came, nothing could be disputed. Nadia had underestimated me, and that would be her undoing. It wasn't only strategy that grew during this time. It was also patience. I learned to endure her verbal barbs without flinching, to let her cruelty wash over me without reacting. Every insult, every mockery, I stored in my mind and cataloged it for later use. I learned to smile while my teeth clenched, to appear fragile while I was anything but. One evening, when I was 14, Nadia tried to manipulate me into confessing to a mistake I hadn't made. She had hidden a small piece of jewelry, a delicate pendant my mother had left me, and accused me of losing it. Her tone was soft, almost gentle, but I recognized it instantly. Guilt trap. "I can't believe you would be so careless," she said, tilting her head, her eyes glinting with feigned disappointment. "Your mother would be so upset." I met her gaze evenly. "I didn't take it," I said, my voice calm, controlled. Her smile flickered. It wasn't anger, it was surprise. For the first time, I think she realized that I was not the timid girl she could manipulate at whim. Alina was there, of course, having insisted on accompanying me that day. "She's testing you," Alina whispered under her breath. "But you're passing. Stay calm." I did. And that day, Nadia learned a lesson she would forget at her peril. I was growing sharper. By 15, I had amassed enough evidence to prove her manipulations, not just to myself, but to an external authority if needed. I began keeping records of strange bank transactions, receipts of payments that didn't make sense, and notes from our household staff, who quietly expressed suspicions about her behavior. The puzzle was forming, but strategy alone wasn't enough. I had to understand her psychology. Alina and I would spend nights theorizing about Nadia's motives, her patterns, and her weaknesses. We studied her interactions with my father, noting his hesitations and her subtle manipulations that kept him obedient. We studied her interactions with others, noting the charm she wielded like a weapon, disarming anyone who might see through her deceit. "Everyone has a weakness," I said one night, staring out the window at the moonlit garden. "We just need to find hers." Alina nodded. "And when we do?" "When the time is right," I said. "We'll act. We won't rush. We'll be patient. That's the power she doesn't understand." That patience paid off sooner than expected. One afternoon, while Nadia was distracted with one of her social calls, I stumbled upon her personal journal, hidden in the study behind a false panel in the bookshelf. The pages were filled with thoughts she never intended anyone to read. Plans, reflections, boasts about her manipulations, even hints at darker intentions I hadn't yet imagined. I read every word, careful not to leave a trace. The revelations were chilling. She had orchestrated situations to isolate my mother from the family, created financial dependencies to make my father vulnerable, and manipulated friends and neighbors to maintain a facade of perfection. Her cruelty was meticulous, calculated, and unrelenting. Alina and I spent that night in silence, The journal spread before us like a map of the labyrinth we had been navigating for years. This is it, I whispered. This proves everything, every doubt, every fear I've had. It's all true. Her hand found mine. Then you have what you need. But remember, this isn't about vengeance yet. It's about timing. We spent the next months preparing. Every encounter with Nadia was careful, measured. I learned to play her game, to anticipate her moves, to appear compliant while gathering more intelligence. It was exhausting work, mentally and emotionally, but I relished it. Each discovery was a small victory, a step closer to the day when truth would finally come crashing down. By 16, I felt ready. I approached a trusted family lawyer, presenting the documentation I had meticulously collected over the years. The lawyer was astonished at the depth and precision of my records, impressed by the clarity of the evidence. "You've done remarkable work, Sarah," he said quietly. This is enough to bring her down. Legally, socially, it's all here." I nodded, feeling a surge of both relief and apprehension. Relief because justice seemed finally within reach. Apprehension because I knew Nadia would fight back, twist the story, and attempt to escape accountability. And she tried. Nadia's first move was to charm my father anew, to sow doubt about my intentions. She whispered subtle insinuations, trying to paint me as unstable, as a girl blinded by resentment. But my father had begun to notice things too. The inconsistencies, the fear she inspired, the subtle but undeniable evidence of her duplicity. He had started to question, to see the threads I had been pulling together for years. The confrontation was inevitable. One evening, I presented the collected evidence to him in the study, my heart pounding. The documents, the journal pages, the financial records. All of it laid bare on the table. He studied them carefully, the color draining from his face as realization dawned. I didn't see it," he murmured, voice shaking. "How could I have been so blind?" "You loved her, Dad," I said softly. "You wanted to believe in her charm. But love doesn't erase manipulation. It doesn't excuse cruelty." Tears filled his eyes. You did all this? You collected everything?" I nodded. I couldn't let her continue. Not for me, not for Mom. I needed to make sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. That night, he hugged me tightly, finally seeing me. Not as a frightened child, but as a force of truth, resilience, and unwavering determination. The following months were a careful dance of legal strategy, public exposure, and controlled confrontation. Nadia tried to strike back, using lies, threats, and her network of enablers. But the truth was relentless. Every lie she told, every attempt to manipulate the narrative, was countered by the meticulous evidence I had collected. Alina was my constant companion through it all. Her presence a calming force that kept me grounded. We worked in tandem, anticipating Nadia's every move, ensuring that our patience and strategy remained intact. And then came the moment of reckoning. Authorities arrived, documents in hand, ready to confront her with irrefutable proof. Nadia's composure faltered for the first time. She tried to smile, to charm her way out, but it was too late. The web of lies she had woven over years of manipulation unraveled in an instant. Her downfall was spectacular, public, and undeniable. For the first time, the world saw her stripped of charm, exposed in all her calculated cruelty. And I watched quietly from the background as the person who had haunted my nights, controlled my home, and tried to destroy my family, finally faced the consequences of her actions. The day Nadia's exposure became public, a strange calm settled over the house. It was as if the air itself had shifted, carrying away the heaviness that had lingered for so long. I watched from the doorway, my hands gripping the banister as the authorities confronted her with everything she had tried to hide. Her composure cracked first. The perfect mask, the smile she had relied on for years, fell away. Eyes wide, lips trembling, she tried to speak, to explain, to manipulate. but every word was met with documents, records, and witnesses she could not discredit. For a moment, I felt nothing, just the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, the quiet triumph that had been years in the making. Then, slowly, a sense of peace began to fill me. The girl who had once trembled in corners, afraid of shadows and whispers, had returned, not broken, but whole. My father stood beside me, his face pale but resolute. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You brought the truth to light. Your mother would be proud." I nodded, tears threatening, but I held them back. I had worked for this moment, yes, but it wasn't only about vengeance. It was about reclaiming our lives. It was about restoring balance, about ensuring that the love and memory of my mother would not be overshadowed by cruelty. Nadia was escorted away, her head held high in defiance, even as the reality of her downfall settled around her. The woman who had haunted our home, who had twisted our lives with cunning and malice, would no longer have power over us. And in that realization, I felt an unshakable liberation. The weeks that followed were gentle in contrast to the years of tension. My father began to open up, sharing memories of my mother that he had kept buried in grief and regret. We laughed, sometimes cried, but always healed a little more. The house, once a stage for manipulation and fear, became a home again, a sanctuary. Alina remained my anchor throughout, her unwavering support reminding me that love could exist alongside vengeance. Together, we ventured out into the world that had once felt so heavy, exploring new experiences, cherishing small moments, and dreaming of futures untainted by the shadows of the past. By the time I reached adulthood, I had not only healed, but I had built a purpose. I studied law, driven by a desire to give voice to those who, like my mother, had been silenced. My experience with Nadia had taught me that truth and perseverance could triumph over deceit and cruelty, and I wanted to ensure that others could benefit from this lesson. My father, too, found his own redemption. He rebuilt his life and career with honesty and humility, sharing his story with others as a cautionary tale and a testament to the power of vigilance and love. He often said that witnessing my growth, my resilience, had been a form of penance, a way to atone for his blindness in the past. Life continued, and the scars we bore became reminders not of pain, but of survival. I visited my mother's grave often, laying roses and cardamom, whispering stories of the life I was building. I told her of Alina, of my father's growth, of the work I was doing to protect others from shadows like Nadia. Each visit was a conversation with the past, a tribute to love and perseverance. Through it all, I realized that revenge, while necessary, was not the ultimate goal. The true victory lay in healing, in reclaiming life, and in choosing love and joy over bitterness and fear. Nadia's downfall had closed a chapter, but the life that unfolded afterward was ours to write, filled with light, laughter, and the promise of a future untethered by malice. And so, standing hand in hand with Alina in the garden, sunlight spilling over the horizon, I understood something profound. The fire I had once kindled for revenge had transformed into a flame of resilience, wisdom, and hope. It guided me toward a life blessed with love, purpose, and the certainty that justice, patience, and courage always leave a mark. In that moment, I whispered to the wind, to the memory of my mother, and to the girl I had once been. We survived, we rose, and we are free. The world was no longer a place to fear. It was a canvas upon which we could paint our own story. And finally, after years of struggle, heartbreak, and careful plotting, I knew that our story was one of triumph, not just over a cruel stepmother, but over the fear and shadows that once threatened to consume us. Our family, rebuilt in love and truth, was stronger than ever, and I smiled, because at last I could truly say the storm had passed, the fire had purified, and life, in all its beauty and resilience, awaited us.